It may have been at this natural amphitheater north of the Sea of Galilee that could easily seat 10,000 people that Yeshua described the kingdom as a mustard plant, usually a very small bush, growing into a monstrosity in which all kinds of fowls of the sky would nest, generally a bad sign in Scripture. What eventually came to be known as the Church is really a mixture of Hebraic truth and Babylonian, Greek, and Roman practices, overlaid with religious terminology that could be taken either way, and was. A plane that gets only 1 degree off course can end up on the wrong continent. It got to the point that any who wished to be part of the institutional church had to cut all ties to their Hebraic roots. But they could not get around the fact that Yahweh's only covenant was still with Israel. So a doctrine formed that the church had replaced the Jews as the new spiritual Yisrael. There is significant overlap between the northern kingdom and what's called Christendom, but Paul had already said enough in Romans 11 to preclude such arrogance against the part of Israel that had a much better record of faithfulness. It wasn't perfect. By the year 132, rabbinic Jews too thought they had found a Messiah, a different one, and the defenders of Israel who followed Yeshua were called traitors if they would not claim Bar Kokhba as the anointed one. But the church also excluded Jewish believers from the councils in which they decided when to celebrate the Messiah's resurrection, and they totally divorced it from the date of Passover. So the polarization became complete, with very few exceptions, and Jews and Christians became hardened into two separate entities. So Yeshua is not the one to blame that the work he started didn't get done the right way. In chapter 43 of Ezekiel, Yahweh tells the prophet,
Son of man, confront the house of Israel with the temple, so they will blush from shame over how they have distorted it.
Sometimes Ephraim's idolatry wasn't so much overtly turning away from Yahweh as dedicating to him different things than he asked for. But he wasn't pleased when Yerovam changed the month in which a festival was observed. And how is that any different from substituting the day pagans had dedicated to the sun for the Sabbath that Yahweh himself ordained? The Reformation did go a long way in removing paganism from the church, but much more remains than we often realize. The real problem with Christmas and Easter is not secularization. They were celebrated in ways that were nothing but pagan, long before Yeshua was ever born. Their very roots are wrong. Most Christians realize that Yeshua could not have been born in December, but have felt that they would dishonor him if they stopped celebrating his birth altogether. One advantage to there being so many knowledgeable Jews recognizing him today is that an answer even to this has come to light. King David set up a schedule for priestly service that clues us in on when John the Immerser's father was told he would have a son. And from there we can calculate when Yeshua would be born, 6 months after John, and it comes out at Sukkot, the 8-day Feast of Tabernacles or Booths. Sukkot comes just after the autumn harvest, when shepherds still would have their sheep out in the fields. It's one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, so Joseph would combine the trip to Bethlehem for the census with the also mandatory journey to the temple. Not everyone could lodge in Jerusalem at such a crowded time, so many would spill over into the surrounding towns. This explains why there was no room in the inn in Bethlehem, less than 5 miles away. The census wasn't taken all at once. Jacob had built stables for his animals when he re-entered the Promised Land. The Hebrew word translated stables here is none other than Sukkot. In fact, where it says the Word was fleshed out and dwelt among us, it means he lived in a temporary dwelling, like a tent or a sukkah. How fitting. But why were shepherds the first to be informed about Yeshua's birth? We now have an answer to this too. Agricultural workers would often build a watchtower like this one near their fields as a place to sleep during the harvest, or to take shelter should an enemy or predator attack. Micah chapter 4 tells us that the first dominion would make its appearance at such a tower, a specific one called the Tower of the Flock, which is even closer to Jerusalem than modern Bethlehem. The Mishnah, a Jewish commentary on Scripture, tells us that this tower was the furthest from Jerusalem that lambs could be raised for specific offerings made on behalf of the whole nation. So the angel was telling not just any shepherds, but particular Levite shepherds, that a lamb had been born in exactly the right place, for which their life's work was a prototype. The angel told them he brought news of great joy. Sukkot is indeed nicknamed the season of joy for all nations. So those who leave Christmas or Easter behind and take on the festivals that Yahweh actually prescribed and that Yehuda has preserved, find that not only have they lost nothing important, they are in fact learning much more than ever about Yeshua. It's the restoration of wave upon wave of information like this that's bringing correction to both Jews and Christians, enabling both to meet back at the beginning, where the truth is actually to be found.